Hi everyone, welcome to the module 3 of Apache Tomcat. It's about Apache Tomcat architecture. We are going to discuss what are different components in Apache Tomcat and its functionality. Then we will go through the understanding of what is basically server.xml file. We will understand its different configuration, and we will discuss a startup file or default file of Apache Tomcat server. Then we will summarize this module at the end of this module. Let's get started. Here we are going to understand what is basically the different components in Apache Tomcat. Basically, in Apache Tomcat, as we discussed, it's basically this understanding this architecture will help us to know more about its functionality. And Apache Tomcat server is, as we discussed, open source, particularly designed for Java-based application and to host Java-based application. It's widely used for deploying and running Java server pages and servlets. It's a very basically stable and has all of the features of a commercial web server, which is also an open source. To discuss the components basically in Apache Tomcat, components basically refer to the essential pieces that make up the Tomcat server and enable it to host and run web application. These components work together to ensure the smooth functionality of web application. In software development, a component is a reusable and independent part of a larger system or an application. It's like a building block that serves a specific function and can be used in different places or project. Basically, we can reuse those components. As you can see in the diagram, there are multiple components available in Apache Tomcat architecture. Basically, we have server and then services and then engine and host and context, and we also have the component related to the connector. These components has a specific role and purpose in the overall functioning of the Apache Tomcat. Basically, these components work together to provide a robust platform for hosting and running the web application in the context of Apache Tomcat. Apache Tomcat basically a Tomcat instance or a server. Basically, when we discuss about the top level component in a Tomcat container hierarchy, only one Tomcat instance can live in a single Java virtual machine or JVM. This approach makes all the Java application run in the same physical machine as a Tomcat server. That's why safe in the case of Tomcat, and it's a JVM. Okay, we will discuss all these details in our upcoming module. Let's navigate to our next slide and see the different functionality of these components available in the Tomcat. The next we have basically is we are going to discuss the functionality of these basically component. As we discussed, for now we are going to discuss what is basically server and a service. Difference between these two components and its functionality. Basically, a server in Apache Tomcat basically represents a whole Catalina servlet container. Basically, in this server.xml file that represents all the characteristics and the configuration of the Tomcat installation. Basically, it provides a default implementation of server interface. It's come with a default configuration and is rarely customized by user. Basically, the main instance that provide the environment for hosting a web application, and it's the basically main instance. It's the foundation of Apache Tomcat and manage the other components. Let's understand the server in this way, as we are going to discuss different architectural model of the Apache Tomcat and its components. The server in Tomcat is essentially an instance of Tomcat software that run independently. When we start Tomcat, basically we are starting a server instance, as we did in our previous module. Multiple server instances can run on the same physical machine, and each configured and managed separately. The server is configured using a server.xml file basically, which contains the different setting and configuration of the entire server instance. This includes the information related to the different other components like connectors, thread pools, hosts, and other components. In summary, Apache Tomcat, the server is a central component that manages the overall infrastructure, configuration, and life cycle of the web server. It provides the environment for hosting and managing multiple web application efficiently, and handles incoming requests through the connectors and engine. Now we are going to understand what is service and its role and functionality in the Apache Tomcat. Service is another component inside the server that basically consists of connectors that share a single container to process their incoming requests. It's basically focused on the handling the incoming requests. A service is an intermediate component which lives inside a server and ties one or more connector to exactly one engine. This service element is rarely customized by users, as we usually deal with the sufficient information available to us by default when we use this basically service. To understand service, a simple way is a service in a Tomcat is a logical grouping or container for a set of connectors like HTTP connectors and the associated component. Basically, it's a unit that handles requests from client like web browsers, and directs them to the appropriate web application for processing. In the simple life cycle of request and response, basically the client using the browser to request the server, and server then handles the request and send back the response to the that's basically functionality of the service, which is basically responsible for manage the request from the client side, and then forward those requests to the server and get the response back to the user. Next, we are going to discuss what is engine. Basically, we are discussing these components inside the Apache Tomcat to understand its architecture. But next, we will discuss the implementation and configuration of these components. Next, we have an engine. Basically, an engine in Apache Tomcat, basically it represents a request processing pipeline for a specific service. It's a response for specific service. As a service may have multiple connectors, the engine received and processed all the requests from these connector. It also handles the response back to the appropriate connector for transmission. Basically, is using connectors and then send the response back to the client for the end user. The engine interface may be implemented to supply custom engine through this is basically unknown, but it can also fulfill this functionality. In Apache Tomcat, the engine basically refers to the fundamental processing unit for handling requests and directing to the appropriate web application based on a requested domain or host. An engine basically is a processing unit with Apache Tomcat that process the request. It's like a traffic controller that ensure requests are sent to the right place for handling. The engine basically manages the life cycle of a web application and directs requests to the appropriate virtual host and web applications based on domain name in the request. Basically, forward those requests to appropriate server and then respond back to the proper domain. That's the functionality of the engine inside the Apache Tomcat. Now we are going to discuss what is host and its functionality. A host is an association of a network name like www.abc.com or your company.com. That's basically an association of a network name to the Tomcat server. Basically, an engine may contain multiple hosts, and the host element also support network aliases such as your company.com and abc.com. That's basically different aliases for the domain names. A user rarely create custom host because the standard host implementation provides significant additional basically functionality. By default, we do not need to configure it. Basically, host basically refers to a virtual host inside the Apache Tomcat, which is a configuration that allows the server to respond to the request for a particular domain or IP address. A host, when we discuss about host, to understand host is a logical entity within a Tomcat that represents a virtual host. It allows the server to serve multiple websites and web applications from a single physical server, each with its own domain name and the IP address. Basically, on we can also host multiple applications by using a single Apache Tomcat server. That's basically the term particularly used for that, that is virtual hosting. We basically host multiple sites on a single basically server. That's all about host. Next, we are going to discuss about the connectors and context, and then we will look into the server XML file. And now we have another component which is a connector. To understand connector, a connector basically handles communication within the client. Basically, there are multiple connectors available with Tomcat, all of which implement the connector interface. These include the quiet connector, which is used for the most HTTP traffic, especially when running Tomcat as a standalone server, and the JK2 connector, which implements the AGP protocol used when connecting Tomcat with Apache HTTP server. We are connecting the Apache Tomcat with another, so then we are using the J2 connector basically, which creates a customized connector and is basically required a significant effort. In Apache Tomcat, the connector is a fundamental component which is responsible for handling communication between clients like web browser and the Tomcat server, and we can also use different connector to connect with different servers like HTTP and Apache. It basically help us in transfer of request and response over a specific network protocol. A connector basically acts as a communication handler in Apache Tomcat. It listens for incoming requests for a specific protocol and process those requests, ensuring they are directed and fulfilled properly. That's the role of connector in Apache Tomcat. Now we are going to discuss the last component, which is context. A context in Apache Tomcat represents a web application. As we discussed, a host may contain multiple contexts, each with a unique path. Basically, we are going to host multiple web application inside the Apache Tomcat. Then we use host later option like virtual hosting. That's similar to this. The context interface may be implemented to create custom context, but this is really the case because the standard context provide significant functionality by default. The context basically refer to web application deployed on the server. It provide unique environment for web application to run independently within the Tomcat server. A context, if we talk about context, it represent a web application which consists of HTML pages, JSP, Java server pages, servlets, and different configuration files, images, and other resources that make a web site or a web application. Basically, contexts can have their own configuration such as servlet mappings, security constraint, and initialization parameter, and many more. These are all information basically related to the context and its role in Apache Tomcat server. Now we have discussed the main basically components of the Apache Tomcat. Basically, this the basically our requirement for discussing the Apache Tomcat for better understanding of the architecture of the Apache Tomcat. These are the basically these are components inside the Apache Tomcat. Basically, these all information related to the container. Apache Tomcat basically, as we discussed, it's basically consist of the different component like Java related, and then basically for its own component. Catalina is consists of grouping application container which exists in well-defined hierarchy. The key component in the hierarchy is Catalina serverlet engine. The Catalina is the actual Java serverlet container, and its implementation is implemented using the basic Java servlet API. The Tomcat, as we discussed, a series of different functional component, and those components combined together with a well-defined rules for a proper architecture of the Apache Tom. That's all related to the Apache Tomcat components, its role and its functionality. We looked in and understand how it works basically inside that. And then we will, in our upcoming module, we will perform all these activity in a practical way for deploying all the Java based application by using the Tomcat. Then we will discuss this configuration. Now we are going to discuss as per our agenda is understanding the basically server.xml file, its role, its configuration. And now we are navigating to our VS Code. Basically VS Code is basically an editor basically used for editing, like basically HTML sites or Java related sites can be configured according to the different programming language. We can also use VS Code for .NET application, Node.js application. Basically it's providing all the basically functionality for handling all the environment for a particular basically language. Now here we have a server.xml file base. This is basically by default server.xml file come with this configuration, and now we are going to study its element in detail. That's come with the default setting or default configuration. Let's discuss functional component in Tom configuration file from inside to outside for better relate the basically all the context. As you can see here, the XML file is a basically markup file for this basically particular come with a particular syntax. Here we are specifying different related to the XML version. Now first of all, we have component like related to server, and inside the server we are specifying different ports and other information to listeners and SSL information related, and then we are specifying this resource, service, and then connector, engine, all the component we discuss, host. Basically we are specifying in this config. Let's understand these basically one by one. First of all, basically a context is basically in the case we are going to discuss the context is basically innermost element of a group of Tomcat components called containers, and it represents single web application. Tomcat automatically basically initiates and configures standard context upon loading the application. In the discussion related to the connectors, basically connectors handles communication with the client. There are multiple connectors available with the Tomcat. HTTP connector is one of the most one for the most of the HTTP traffic, and AGP connector we discussed for connecting different HTTP basically server. The next one is basically we are going to specify the default port. For this case is in our server tag. Basically we are going to use this 8005 port for this, and we are also specifying the different information related to in the listener related SSL engine options on basically for this basically listeners. Then we are specifying some global naming resource, like we are going to use the different information related to user database description. User data can be updated and saved, and then we are going to use the different information in that particular tags of the basically this XML file. The next service tag we are going to service, as we discussed, an intermediate component which lives inside a server and ties one or more connected to exactly one engine. Basically inside the service we are mentioning these connected. Tomcat default configuration include the service like here we specified Catalina is by default. Tomcat add this in its configuration which associate HTTP and AJP connected by default to in the Catalina engine. According to the connector, the and engine are the subsequent sub elements of the service element. As you can see here, inside the service we have sub element which is connected, and then engine are the sub elements. And the on the top we use the server, basically server tag. The server is a top component and represent the an instance of a Tomcat. It contains one or more services inside this. Basically this is the main component which inside which we are discussing all the other component here. All the other tag like service, engine, host, and service inside this particular server tag. It contains one or more service, each with own engine and connectors. Let's discuss it from the top. Like after the server we are specifying this listener tag. The listener, what is a listener? Listener is a Java object that by implementing the basically org.apache.catalina.code, basically it's an interface able to respond specific events, like we are specifying the related the JR different event like JR memory leak, Jasper listener, and app lifecycle listener. These are the listener. Let's discuss these. First of all, this listener, ARP lifecycle listener, it's enables Apache portable runtime. APR is a short form of Apache portable runtime library. This library provide OS level support to the Tomcat. This basically particularly listener perform this functionality. Next one is the Jasper listener. Basically it enables Jasper, which is a JSP engine. This listener is what make it possible to recompile JSP documents that have been basically updated. It's a particular functionality of this particular listener. Next we have JRE memory leak prevention listener. Let's discuss this functionality inside this basically server.xml file. This basically listener deal with the different noun situation that can cause memory leak. To avoid memory leak, we are using this particularly listener. It's to deal with the different memory leak scenarios. Next, let's quickly discuss these listeners. It's a global resource lifecycle listener. It's basically responsible for instantiating and instantiating the managed beans associated with the global Java naming and directory interface. It's responsible for this. And the next one and the last one listener that's come with the by default configuration is a thread logo leak prevention listener. It's deal with the different noun situation that can cause memory. That's the basic purpose of this listener. Now we are going to discuss this global naming resources. What are these purpose of these tags? These inside the configuration file server.xml and its functionality. The global naming resource element can only be defined inside the server component. Inside this we can only define this. It defines the JNDI resource that are accessible through the server. Basically the only resource defined in the default server.xml is a user and a password memory based database defined via the conf Tomcat user. There's another file we will discuss in our upcoming module. That's basically purpose of the global resource naming. The JND is basically the Java naming and directory interface. Basically global naming and interface basically used for inserting and managing the pins associated with the Java. The next we are using inside the basically we discuss the service and the connector basically used inside the our configuration file. Now we are going to discuss the details about this connector inside the inside our service. Basically a connector basically, as we discussed, handle the communication with the clients. There are multiple connectors available with the Tomcat. We can specify the multiple connectors inside the service tag here. Basically this provide different functionality in connecting the other web server. Basically we can also connect different servers, other servers by using these connectors. The default configuration of Apache Tomcat includes a connector that handle HTTP communication. By default the connector waits for request coming through this port, which is 8080. That's why URL for example always start with the HTTP localhost and then port 8080 in the case of the Apache. As we discussed and saw in our previous module of configuration and installation of Apache Tomcat. The request for this application go through a single instance of this connector. Each request causes the instantiation of a new thread and remain alive with the connector for the duration of that request. The connection, when we discuss about the connection timeout, basically it's attribute set to 20,000 here, means that session is terminated after 5 hours and 33 minutes and 20 seconds for inactivity. If there isn't connectivity or during this time period, then the session will be terminated, while it basically redirect to port 8443, which means that incoming request that requires socket layer transported or redirect to the port 8443. Next we have another connector. Let's quickly discuss this. Basically this AJP connector. AJP connector basically lets Tomcat only handle dynamic web pages and lets pure HTML server, e.g. Apache server, handle the request for the static pages. Basically this basically maximize the efficiency with which the requests are handled. You can probably comment out this connector as a Tomcat itself is a pretty fast today, or simply if you don't plan using web server together with the Tomcat. That's a basic functionality of this AJP connector. Next we are going to discuss the basically engine and host and other attributes inside the configuration file. Next, engine, as we discussed, engine represent requesting request processing pipeline for a specific service. As a service may have multiple connectors and connectors, the engine that receive and process the request from those connectors inside the service. It handles the response back to the appropriate connector for transmission of the client. An engine must contain one or more hosts. As you can see here, inside the engine we have a host tag or host component here. Basically engine must contain one or more host, one of which is designed as the default host. The default Tomcat configuration includes the engine Catalina, which contain the host, local host, obviously designed to be a default host because this is the only one. The Catalina engine handles all incoming requests received via HTTP connector and sent back to the corresponding responses. It forwards basically to the proper basically mechanism and follows to the corresponding basically request. Inside the basically engine we have basically another component realm, and we are going to discuss its functionality here. This component can appear inside the container component engine. Basically it represents the database of basically users. That's the purpose of this particular component, and user role. Its purpose is to support container-based authentication. That's the main purpose of this tag. Now we are going to discuss about the host tag, and that's basically all the tag inside available by default inside our server.xml. What is the purpose of the host tag here? Basically a host is an association of a network name, as we discussed earlier, like in this like we are specifying any domain like abc.com or yourdomain.com to the Apache Tomcat. A host can contain any number of context or application. Basically inside the host we can have multiple applications. You can define several hosts on the same server. For example, if you have registered your domain like yourdomain.com, you can define host name as w1.yourdomain.com and w2.yourdomain. That's a basic concept of the virtual hosting, but it will be only accessible from the internet. If your domain name server maps its name to the IP or the computer. As we see here, the default configuration of the host component is basically includes the host name, like localhost. The association between localhost and your computer is done instead by writing an entry basically in it is your we are specifically mentioning here to deal with the local host. The basically host attribute, which is the next attribute, is app based in the host. Basically, this defines the application directory within the Tomcat installation folder. For each application is then identified by its path within the directory. The only exception in this case is that basically is the exception is a path root, which is mapped to the basically empty directory string. The application based directory for the local host is a web apps. Basically here this means the application directory is C program files, Apache Software Foundation, Tomcat, and then web apps, and then root folder. As we saw during the mapping of the Catalina home variable inside the system variable, we specified that path for the Apache Tomcat, basically inside C program files and then Apache Software Foundation, then Tomcat. Basically this is the path, and inside that there is a web path which is identified by the empty string. Therefore the URL is then it will become http:/localhost.8080/. For other application which reside inside the directory other than root, then we will specify for the URL like http localhost 8080 and then the name of the basically over app. The next attribute is basically unpack was. Basically, let's discuss it quickly. It means that if you drop a var file in the app based directory, Tomcat will automatically expand its normal folder and extract that zip file or var file. If you set this attribute false, the application will run directly from the var file. This obviously means a slower execution of the process of our application, because Tomcat need to unzip the var file at the execution time. The next important attribute here is auto deploy, which is basically by default set to true. And the auto deploy means that if you drop application in the app based directory while the Tomcat is running, it will be deployed automatically. During the you don't need to stop the Apache Tomcat, it will run that particular basically application automatically. That's all about the basically host tag component and its related inside tab attributes. We have discussed these. Now the last component inside which is available inside the host is Valve. Let's discuss it quickly and wind up our session here. This value is an basically interceptor like element that when inserted in the container like context host or engine, it basically intercepts all the incoming HTTP requests before they reach the application. It basically intercepts those requests before reaching to the application. This gives us the ability to pre-process the request directed to a particular application onto the application running on a virtual host or the application running within an engine. This basically intercept those requests before reaching the server and then forward those requests to the particular application. That's basically a purpose of the this component here, which is being used inside the Apache Tomcat configuration file server.xml. That's basically an example of this tagging functionality. Basically we are setting different attributes, prefix and pattern, and just basically look for those basically requests and then forward to the appropriate application. That's all information about the server.xml file, and we are going to now summarize what we have covered for this basically module. We have discussed about the different components inside the Apache Tomcat server. We discussed the different components, what are those components, and what is the functionality and role of those components inside the Apache Tomcat server. Basically we discuss about the multiple components, like we discuss about the server, service, then engine, host, connector, and context. Basically we also go through the difference between those command. Like a server basically is essentially an instance of the Apache Tomcat software that run independently and is configured using the file which we discussed is server.xml, and basically is a main central component that manages overall infrastructure and configure. We discussed the service basically is a logical grouping or container for a set of connectors like HTTP connector, and the associated components basically handle requests from the client. Then we discussed about the engine. Engine is basically referred to the fundamental processing unit which is responsible for handling requests and redirecting those requests appropriate to the appropriate web application. Discuss about the host. Hosts refer to basically virtual host which configuration allow server to respond the request for a particular domain. We can host multiple applications by using host configuration which is on the same server. By using the virtual hosting concept, we can host multiple applications inside a single server by using the a virtual hosting concept. Then we discuss about the connector. Connector basically in Apache Tomcat is a fundamental component which is responsible for handling communication between the clients basically by using a specific network protocol and request and response lifecycle. Basically it's, in short, it acts as a communication handler. Next we have discussed about the another component which is a context. Context basically in Apache Tomcat refer to a specific web application which is deployed on the server and provides unique environment for the basically for that application to run it in independent base. That was the purpose of the context. And, after that we discussed the details about the basically a server.xml file and different tags being used inside this file, and then we discuss about those tags one by one, and basically we discussed that these configuration which are available by default in the server.xml file, which helps basically defining web application. We can specify different modules for web application using the all available tags, which plays an important role in the architecture of the Apache Tomcat. Is individual functionality make Apache Tomcat robust is functionality and helps in adding the basically configuration files, and is specify the different methods for handling all the operations inside this particular configuration file. We discussed those in detail. Next we have go through all these components in detail. Now to summarize, the Tomcat server.xml basically is a file that helps in specifying the configurations and properties of each of the modules in the Tomcat that enables to get the instance of Tomcat that will behave in a completely customized way as per the modules and configurations defined in these files. These are the basic the default configuration file. In our upcoming module we will discuss how we can customize this file, add more details in over basically this file, the XML file, which has a number of configuration options used to specify how it should work. All the options are set in a configuration file written using the XML notation. Basically this file is picked up when the XML server is started, and as such the configuration cannot be changed without stopping or starting the server. The main purpose of the Tomcat server.xml file is itself to define the configuration for the instance of the web server. Basically the main element inside the configuration file is configuration server.xml is the server element, which we discussed. It plays an important role. All the configuration are basically inside this particular component. When the this is the basically important tag which is which has a single child file tag of context. Basically we inside this we are specifying the different different other tags. This configuration file helps in setting up multiple modules and their corresponding properties of a configuration, which helps determining the behavior of the Tomcat web server or your system, and create an instance of Tomcat in a flexible way, which helps in controlling the features of your previously this module called instructor in the Tomcat server. The use of these is most of the time used in this module in the Tomcat configuration file. There are various modules that basically can be used for the proper functionality. That's all for this quick summary of the details on different components inside the Apache Tomcat. Basically we have discussed. That's basically all for this module and this video. In our next module, we are going to deploy a web application by using the Apache Tomcat server. We will cover all the steps that are required for deploying an application on Apache Tomcat server. As we configured and installed the Apache Tomcat in our previous modules, we will now configure the settings for web application, deploy all the web application, and follow the steps for proper and successful deployment. We will perform on this activity in our next module. See you soon in the next